Across the Spiderverse has just had its opening weekend, and it's safe to say everybody is blown away by the movie and having a wonderful time with it. However, my feelings about the movie are actually a little bit more complicated than what I was expecting, so I'm gonna try to work them out right here. I'm Oliver the Ricketts, and I love and adore Spider-Man. Seriously, it is my favorite thing. The year that a Spider-Man movie comes out is the best year because in the middle there is a weekend that feels seriously like a holiday weekend to me. Spider-Man weekend, when the new Spider-Man opens. Every iteration of the character is near and dear to my heart, and that of course includes the original Into the Spider-Verse film. So I was cautiously optimistic for Across the Spider-Verse, something that was apparent in all of my trailer breakdowns for that movie. The first film was such a delight, so naturally I was so excited to see where the story would go next. But as a longtime Spidey fan, I also know that Sony has a terrible track record with Spider-Man sequels.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
And I was very worried that, as they've done before, they would miss what people liked about the original movie and go for an overstuffed Cameo Fest sequel rather than a thought-provoking, inspiring next chapter. But I'd be lying if I said that that cautious optimism did not turn into full-blown hype about a week before the movie came out. Right around the time that early reviews for this movie surfaced on Twitter, people were saying it was not only worthy of the first movie, but it was actually better than Into the Spider-Verse. Some people saying it was the best Spider-Man movie of all time, and others saying the best animated film of all time. One person even went as far as to say this would be the next animated Best Picture winner. Hearing these things, I have no reason to believe that they won't be true. The first movie knocked it out of the park, so I allowed myself to get sucked into the hype hard. And I don't regret it because that is part of the fun of a really good Spider-Man film, is that build-up that leads to the satisfaction of getting a real Spider-Man story. And so despite the numerous times that Sony has burned me with subpar Spider-Man sequels, I was excited. It's also worth noting that although not everything I have to say about this movie is positive, I love every Spider-Man movie that there is, and that hasn't changed. I have found something enjoyable about every cinematic outing that Spidey has had throughout the entire run of Spider-Man movies. Even in movies like Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I consider to be bottom of the barrel.
You need me?
Yes! Now before I jump into this review, I also want to preface this by saying my opinion could change at any time. I'm going again tonight, and any of those viewings could result in me liking the movie more or less, and it is okay to change your opinion about a movie. Also, any of the negative things that I say should not be interpreted as me hating this movie, because I really, really like this movie a lot. But I'm not going to sit here and wax poetic about how great this is, because there's a million videos that do that on YouTube already. I'm going to try to give you some real thoughts, some critiques about the movie, what works and what doesn't. And I'll start with the obvious positive, which is everybody's right. This film is visually a masterpiece. As an animated film, it's probably one of the best that there is. The different styles and blends of animation make this such a treat to watch. It is honestly overwhelming to the eyeballs on the first couple of viewings because it's so hard to take in all of the amazing things that are going on visually in this movie. It is somehow even more visually pleasing and gorgeous than its predecessor, which was also visually pleasing and gorgeous. There is simply no frame in this movie that is boring to look at. I'm actually willing to go on record and say this is one of the top 10, if not number 1, best looking movies I've ever seen. Not Spider-Man movies, movies. Period. It's just a treat to see the Spider-Man universe through these filmmakers' eyes in this sense. But this positive goes along with one of my biggest negatives for the film, which is that the story is a little light. One of the things that made Into the Spider-Verse so great is how deep and emotionally intelligent the story is, and how human those characters feel. And I'm not just talking about Miles, who of course feels even more human here. I'm talking about every character that shows up in that movie.
It can get weirder.
It goes beyond being a great Spider-Man outing. That's the thing. This movie is not one of the best films of all time, but it's a really great Spider-Man outing. It is so much fun, but it's not Into the Spider-Verse, at least from a story structure. And of course, there are some themes that are just as emotionally intelligent as the first time, such as the role of parents in their children's lives and how much of a child's life is owed to their parents and how much should you be yourself before anything else.
I'm I'ma do my own thing.
And all of those moments ring true and genuine and are the best parts of the film. However, they are much less the main focus than they were last time, at least in my opinion. I almost hope that next time we get a slightly uglier, less fun to look at movie, but that time is put into giving us a great story, something a cut above the original to send this trilogy off. And of course that leads me to positive number 2, which is that this movie makes me unreasonably excited for the next Spiderverse movie. I want to see what happens next so badly. Beyond the Spiderverse has now gone from being a movie that I was looking forward to my most anticipated movie from now until March. The twist at the end of this film is genius. It is such a good setup for a really cool movie, and I can't wait to see it next year. I think it has potential to make Part 3 one of Spider-Man's best films yet. Let me gush about how great this take on Miles is. Can I please? You'll allow it? All right, cool. I think one of the biggest side effects about watching this movie is it will make you want a standalone Miles Morales animated film. Not a live action one, although I think that would be amazing as well. Not another Spider-Verse movie, although I'll watch anything they do. The best part of this movie is Spider-Man being in Brooklyn, working with his dad without his dad knowing he's Spider-Man, stopping villains, and interacting with the people that he meets as Spider-Man. It is peak Spider-Man cinema, and it sings. It works like magic here. It just feels so Spider-Man, and those parts of the movie had me sitting in the theater with a big stupid grin on my face. I could not get enough of Miles as Spider-Man. He's such a great hero. He's such a great character. There's this one moment in particular where Spider-Man is reheating an empanada, and the tiny conversation that follows when he's eating and paying for this empanada. It's such a small thing, but it just shows such a great understanding of who Spider-Man is, how he interacts with the community, and what makes the character special. This version of the character doesn't need to end after Spider-Verse is over. Do more of this. And you know, while you're at it, let's see a Spider-Gwen film too, because my second favorite part of this movie is all of the wonderful things that it does with Gwen in its opening act. There's one more great sequence in this film that I have to talk about, and that's a shorter one between Peter B. Parker and his Mary Jane watching their child. And it's a scene that is over before you know it, but I did want to stop and talk about it because this is the Peter Parker Mary Jane relationship that I want to see in Spider-Man media. And across all of Spider-Man, comics, games, movies, there is an absolute refusal to give this to us. They are two people who love and respect each other. And it's a relationship that as a fan, I love and I want to see more of. This is one of my favorite scenes in the history of my favorite Marvel couple. And of course, no superhero film is complete without its villain. And Across the Spider-Verse has a great villain. A villain worthy of the company of Alfred Molina's Doc Ock and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. Better than the last movie's Kingpin and on par with that film's Olivia Octavius. And of course I'm talking about The Spot.
The Spot.
The Spot is one of my favorite deep-cut Spidey villains who I have discussed at length at this point on this channel covering this movie. Fun fact, did you know that his name Jonathan On is a play on the phrases Johnny on the spot and spot on? There's just a little Spider-Man fun fact for you. It tickles me. I like that. One of my worries going into this film is that the Spot would get the shaft and be used much more as just a side villain or an opening set piece, like the new Goblin in Spider-Man 3 or the Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2. But that's not what this movie chooses to do with him at all. In fact, the Spot, I'll say it, is clearly Miles' future nemesis, arch nemesis, and we love this for him. And personality-wise, I love Jonathan Schwartzman's portrayal of the Spot. Not confident, but still very self-serious. A victim of his own hubris, but dead set on blaming all of his misfortune on Spider-Man. This is classic Spider-Man villain stuff. However, this means I also have to talk about the villain that did not work for me, and one of the biggest negatives of this movie, which is its take on Spider-Man 2099, aka Miguel O'Hara, aka one of the main marketing pushes for this film. And I'm sure you know by now, from watching any YouTube video on this movie, that Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, is a very popular Spider-Man character and has been since the 90s. People love this character. And I, for one, was expecting a little more from the first take of this character on screen. But this version is unfortunately just a little bit too two-dimensional for me personally. Overall, and it might change in the next movie, I found him to be kind of a missed opportunity. Spider-Man 2099 comes into this movie as somebody who is working against Miles, but doing it for the greater good. And that's an angle that should be played up more here. But we really only see it from Miles' side of the story. You should be able to look at this film like Miles is the villain too. You can see it from Miles' point of view, but you should also be able to look at things from Miguel O'Hara's point of view, which means that Miguel needs to be cool. He needs to be more likable than he is here. In another universe, we should be able to see a world where Miguel and Miles get along. But in this one, he's married to his convictions and he has to do what he has to do, the same way that Miles does. But the biggest problem here is that we don't have any time to develop a relationship between Miguel and Miles for you to feel that, because we hardly get any one-on-one time with Miguel himself. For a movie that is so long, so much of its key runtime is focused on cameos and appearances that are admittedly fun, but don't add anything to the story here. And actually, it does wind up taking away from some of the key characters in the story that I would have liked more time with. The biggest example being Miguel O'Hara, but also including Jessica Drew and Ben Reilly, who are very much two-dimensional, one-note characters. And I'll be the first to admit, I was sitting in that theater cheering and clapping with everybody else. But this cameo fest comes at the price of Miguel's character. Because at the end of this movie, I know nothing about him really, other than that he's a little mad and a little sad at some events that have happened. And of course that he's fighting for the greater good of the universe, and he doesn't think that Miles is a part of that. And I think this is something that could be very easily fixed. There are multiple instances in this movie that could have elevated this relationship. Have Miguel appreciate Miles as a smart person. Even though his distaste for Miles is explained in the movie, it would have gone a long way to show him have respect for Miles in some way, or at least respect for one of our main characters, which he has none. Because there's nothing about him that would make him feel like a good leader or even a likable person. I also think it is worth mentioning, as long as I'm on negatives, that Sony is added again with the spoilery promotional material for Spider-Man movie. Typically this doesn't bother me. They do have a long history of showing way too much in their trailers. In fact, you can go back and find the last image of every Spider-Man movie in its trailer. Now this movie, I felt the two trailers that I watched were not that spoilery. They actually didn't show me that much. It's TV spots that I see on mute at the gym, or targeted ads on Twitter and YouTube that showed me every scene of this movie. So when I got to the end, I actually said, I don't think there's a single scene that I have not seen a frame of at least. Let me show you some of the more spoilery images that Sony was willing to give away in their commercials for this film. Obviously, if you haven't seen it yet, skip this part and go to this timestamp down below so you don't see these images. It is truly unbelievable that in a movie that relies so heavily on the audience being pleasantly surprised by some of the visuals that you do, that Sony had no self-control with a lot of these crazy visuals that now will no longer function as a surprise to a lot of viewers, myself included. All in all though, I do want to end this on a positive note and say that this movie is so successful in delivering a really fun time at the movies for Spider-Man fans. And it's also succeeded in elevating Miles as a character once again. I love this franchise, and I do think that with a really solid third movie, it has potential to be one of the best superhero trilogies of all time. as well as just one of the best film trilogies. I give Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse an A-. Folks, if you like this video and you want to see any of my other opinions on all things Spider-Man, including games, comics, movies, etc., feel free to subscribe and like this video to see more just like it. I also talk about a lot of pop culture, strange happenings, and just things that catch my interest. I do a lot here. I'm going back to see the movie again. I'm Oliver the Ricketts in every universe, and I love Spider-Man. And overjoyed, and I look like I need a haircut, everybody. I'm looking a little whack.